I'll start with a quick introduction about what we do and why we started today, and then it's mainly Ed, our keynote speaker for today, that'll cover everything for you. So about the event for today, our goal with this is to basically create a recurring event. So we want to do this every year, and basically the main goal is to connect investors and executives to keep them informed on the latest innovations in terms of digital commerce. And for today, we specifically chose China because if I speak from my own personal experience, it's a hard market or industry to better understand, to cover, obviously from language, but also I think the European, especially international media, they don't cover as much, I would say. So that's why we chose it as a topic for today. And Ed is a very experienced analyst in this. He also does trips over there. I'm very excited to have him for today and also to get his insights. So those are the two things we have a small, we break it up into two parts. So the first one is on opportunities, and then the second is more on the threats. Right, then a bit about Conway, so who we are. We started a bit over a year and a half ago. My background is in software development and in product management, and we specifically focus on consumer and retail companies because that's where our experience is, and that's what I'll briefly, 2 or 3 minutes, take you through. So what we do is we work with investors and executives looking to win in the digital age. That's sort of the shortest pitch I could give. And one of the reasons that we started doing that is that also from personal experience, one of my companies was acquired by a large corporate, and we always felt that it's quite hard, especially for people that are not from that world, to better understand how to tell the good from the bad technology. So that's what we often help investors with to find it out, to open up the black box, because that's often the problem that our clients encounter, is that technology is an engine for digital growth, but especially in the M&A process, it's often a black box, which can have very strong strategic implications. And that's a solution we'd like to provide, is that we serve as a technology partner on their side, just that they have legal or financial advisors. And we can serve based on our experience on independent decision making, and also from a risk perspective, but also from opportunities perspective. Who we are and what we do is we are a boutique consultancy for digital commerce specifically. And I think one of the key drivers for what we do, why we do that, is that what we've learned from ourselves is that technology often is the backbone of a modern business. And if you don't align that well and you don't make that part of an operating model, it's going to be a blocker for your growth. That's where our experience is. Martin and myself. Martin over there is we've both served as digital executives in fast-growing companies, and I think that's the basis of what we do with consultancy, is to share those experiences, sometimes war stories as well, to help our clients with that. And what we specifically do is independent advice on strategy, technology, and data, specifically for those 3 areas, often to investors, but also to executives, specifically in digital commerce. One client that I just wanted to highlight as an example is Marisa Maris, which is a Dutch-based water and personal care brand. And one of the strategic challenges that they had is they wanted to go from a wholesale strategy more to a direct-to-consumer strategy. So that's why we help them on the strategy side. But then also you encounter what type of technology stack you actually need for that. That's very different from a wholesale company versus a direct-to-consumer company. So we also help them to streamline that and to basically set up for this different strategy and how to align their operating model for that. What we offer specifically are basically 2 things. Pre-acquisition, we often start with a quick scan, so to help you understand what are specific red flags when acquiring or investing in a specific company. And then often post-acquisition, we follow up with an action plan. But also if there are specific portfolio companies that are a bit behind on growth, we can actually help with a specific growth scan to identify those blockers and to see why the growth path is not up to ambition, basically. So those are the 2 key things that we now focus on. And then later, if that goes well, we can also help with a value creation program. And that's in these steps. So what I already mentioned, first step is basically quick scan pre-acquisition, and then a growth scan post-acquisition for a portfolio company. That's it from my side. So that's about Conway. Feel free to reach out, but those are the things that we currently do. Then I'll hand it over to Ed.
Thanks for coming. Thanks to Conway to invite me here to talk to you people about China. It's where I'm going to be taking you. As a matter of fact, what you're going to get today is like a master class. It's going to be 2 sessions with a break in between, so you can listen to some other people than me, both about 45 minutes. So before the break, we'll talk about opportunities and the inspiration that you can get from China, especially new forms of e-commerce that we quite often don't know yet. And after the break, we look at the threats because the Chinese are coming. Maybe they're already here. We'll see. I'll end before the break with a bit of a cliffhanger. So before the break, I'm going to tell you about these new forms of e-commerce and how in China the market and the internet companies are constantly changing and adapting to new circumstances, but also to maximize customer value based on the data that they gather. So that's what I'll be talking about in the beginning. My name, Ed Sander, for people that read Chinese, Aide, that's my Chinese name. I lived in China for a couple of years, and I've been writing a lot about China for our own website, chinatalk.nl, but also for TechBus China, which is a TechBus China insider newsletter specifically for investors also, where we use a lot of more insider intelligence. So in this, what I also do is things like today, so keynote speeches. So I talk a lot to different audiences about China. And before COVID, I actually used to take people like you to China for a study tour. And then in the morning in the hotel, I would do a presentation like I will be doing today. And then in the afternoon, we would go into the city to actually experience all of that. Hasn't been possible for 3 years now, but it looks like we will be able to start this up again in the second half of the year. So that's been a long wait, but I'm really looking forward to do that again because it's one of the most fun things that I've done in my life. So again, before the break, the evolution of e-commerce in China. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happened, especially in the last 10 years. I'm going to share some learnings from new retail, C2M, live commerce, some ecosystems, and we'll move into what is coming after the break with e-commerce cross-border from China. Now, I could easily talk about all of these subjects as well as all of the subjects and the companies that I'll be talking about after the break for an hour or more. I won't put you through that kind of torture. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to give you the highlights of these developments. But there's much more to learn. So if you're really interested in some of these topics, at the end of the second presentation, I'll show you a QR code. If you scan that, I'll send you a PDF with the handouts of all of these slides. So you don't have to take notes or pictures. Will all be sent to you. And I will send you links to more archives with a lot of articles I wrote about all of this. So you can dive even deeper if you want to. But let's start by looking at e-commerce in China. So in 2005, the e-commerce market in China was only 0.4% of the total global e-commerce market. If you fast forward a bit, about 10 years later, it's the biggest e-commerce market in the world. Now, of course, you might say, well, that's 1.4 billion people, so that's not so strange, but the speed with which this happened is very impressive. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the Chinese market for e-commerce, it's bigger than the next 9 markets added up together. So it's incredibly large. But more interesting than those figures about the size of the market is actually what's been happening in the past 10 years, because e-commerce began a bit like we know it, but it's evolved in very different forms of e-commerce. Now, 10 years ago, yesterday I had dinner with some people from the Alibaba office here in the Netherlands. We sort of were talking about the good old days when they still had 80% market share in China. And that was through their websites, Taobao. It's just a C2C platform, basically, comparable with eBay and Tmall. The second biggest party was Jingdong, JD.com. At that time, a bit less than 9%. So that's the second biggest one. And nowadays, these companies are described as being shelf commerce. Have you heard about the term shelf commerce? So shelf commerce is not really known here because we don't have really a lot to differentiate from the way that we still do e-commerce. But shelf commerce, basically, you can understand as follows. It is people searching for products. And it's basically you have a very clear purchase intention. You are looking for a specific product and you go to a website. What you normally do is you go to the search bar at the top. That's why all of the platforms that we normally use have a very prominent search bar at the top. And in China, 93% of the people that use an app like this find their products through a keyword search. So that's, again, that's people searching and finding products. What you need to be able to do that is a very strong search engine so that people that enter your app can quickly find the right products. This is in China already sort of considered to be old-fashioned. And I'll show you what it turned into in a bit. But if you now look at the market, what it looks now today, what it looks like today, you'll see a couple of things. Now, I don't have the figures for 2022 yet, but these are the estimated figures. Some of these big companies are not very sharing a lot of data anymore, but Alibaba has lost a lot of market share. Don't feel too sorry for them because the market kept on growing and Alibaba has also kept on growing. But as far as market share is concerned, it lost some to Jingdong. But the most interesting thing is that here you still had a very fragmented market with very small, relatively small companies. Even Amazon had less than 1% market share in China. And those have mostly disappeared into this other group. So they've lost market share. And there's three totally new players that weren't even there 10 years ago. Pinduoduo, Douyin, and Kuaishou. And I'll tell you all about these different companies and why they became so big so quickly. One of the things that happened because of all of these new parties, but also new forms of e-commerce entering the market, was that the costs of acquisitions of new customers began rising very sharply, especially after 2014, as you can see here. So in 2015, 2016, it was getting really hard and very expensive for Chinese internet companies to acquire new customers. And that resulted in a form of e-commerce you might have heard about already a bit. It's called new retail. So basically these internet companies realized if it's getting so expensive to find a new customer online, maybe we should find them offline and convert them to online. So back in 2016, Jack Ma, he said, in the future, there will be no more online or offline retail. There will only be new retail. Well, what did he mean by this? Well, we are still maybe thinking in terms of online, omni-channel, multi-channel, but within new retail, these channels completely merge. So as I was telling Jons earlier on today, is in China, you could go into a shop and you would have a cloud shelf with the long tail of products that are not actually available in the shop. And you could, on that cloud shelf, you could bring up a QR code, scan the QR code, and it would be delivered to you at home in the evening. So that's a form of new retail. Another form of new retail which appeared was this. Because you have a lot of small pop-up-mom shops and a lot of convenience stores in China. And there's not a lot of concentration of different brands that are active in retail. So Alibaba actually went to these small convenience stores and pop-up-mom shops and they said, what we can do is we can turn you into a Tmall shop. You will get a nice sign. Tmall, a very popular, very well-known and respected brand. So if you present yourself as sort of the franchisor of Tmall, you will gain more business. The only thing you have to do, of course, is you will have to buy your products with our wholesale platform, Linksotong, and you will have to use Alipay, which is our payment system. And thereby they, of course, started gathering more data from people that were buying offline. But it also worked the other way around, because what they also said to these convenience store owners is, we know exactly what the people around your store are buying online. We know what the popular products are. So what we can do is we can tell you what is missing in your store and what you should put on your shelves. And then thereby we can increase your revenue. And the same thing actually happened with Jingdong as well. Their system is called Xintonglu. And then you get to be a JD.com shop. So that's one of the things that happened with this new retail movement. Another thing that happened is a shop You might think this is HEMA. There were quite a few journalists at the time that thought that HEMA was becoming active in China, but in Chinese you actually pronounce it Gema, and it's wordplay on the Chinese word for hippo. So in English it's also called Fresh Hippo, this store. And it became the most popular and the biggest fresh food supermarket. Now, what does that mean? If you go into one of those Gema stores, and I think the first one was launched back in 2016, you can actually see a lot of these tanks, fish tanks with fresh fish, crabs, lobster that are still crawling around in these fish tanks. And Chinese people are really crazy about really fresh food. So you could go into one of those stores and you could decide to take one of those lobsters or crabs or fish home, but if your cooking skills were not that good, you could also decide to have the staff in that store actually prepare it for you. And you could eat it there. So it was a supermarket with a catering at the same time. Now, if you did that a couple of times, you would see that there was much more in the store, a lot of interesting high quality products, a lot of imported goods as well. But if you walk around in one of those stores, you also find out that there's something happening under the ceiling, because you've got this conveyor belt system that is running through the whole store under the ceiling. And that is something that is for the people that shop online, that buy online. Because actually it's not just a supermarket, it's not just a restaurant, it is also a fulfillment center. So it does the logistics. So as a consumer, especially if you've been to one of those shops a couple of times and you trust the brand, you trust this supermarket, you can simply order through the Gema app. Just in your, from the couch at home and have it delivered to you. If you walk into one of those Gema stores, one of the things that you will find is there's a lot of staff running around, but they're not really stocking the shelves. What they are actually doing is they are order picking. They have these handheld devices, and the orders for the of the customers that come in through the app come on their handheld device, and they pick it in their part of the store. And in that conveyor belt system, it goes to the warehouse on the back of the store. Different bags from different parts of the store are actually coming in, are being consolidated, and then you'll have a small army of delivery guys, kuaidi as they call them in Chinese, waiting at the back of the Gema to bring it to your home within 30 minutes. So it might not be as fast as the flash delivery guys that we have here in the Netherlands, but still quite fast, within 3 kilometers, and most of the time also for free if you order above a certain level. Now, this has become really, really popular, especially in the bigger cities, in the first tier cities, as they call them in China, where you have a high population density. That's where this system works very well. So you have about 300 of these stores, and they're actually so popular that some people are actually looking to buy a house that is within that 3 kilometer range. And the house prices, I think, have even gone up because of that around these Gema stores. So that's one of the things that happened when there was stagnation in the growth of the online market and the rising customer acquisition cost. But what also happened is, even with new retail, most of this takes place in the larger cities that you can find around the east coast of China. And when the e-commerce started to get saturated, another thing that they could do is they could go inland. So go to the rural areas and find new customers that were not online and were not shopping online yet, because you might have been to Shanghai, and this is the skyline that we all know about, but a large part of the Chinese population still lives in these kinds of circumstances. As a matter of fact, if you go and look at the division of the different types of cities, those first tier cities are Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. Then these are normally the capitals of the provinces. And fourth tier cities are considered to be small cities in China. My own parents-in-law, I'm married to a Chinese lady. My own parents-in-law live in Datong, which is a fourth tier city, which means that it only has 2 million inhabitants. And then it goes to 5, 6, 7 tier city, etc. But actually, more than 500 million people are still living in the countryside, in small villages. And those people, most of the time, were not shopping as much online. And a lot of them were still coming online, actually getting internet access through their smartphones. But a thing that you need to do is, these people have a lower disposable income. So how can you get the prices down to get them interested? And that is another thing that happened, that's consumer to manufacturer, C2M. I myself prefer F2C, factory to consumer. And this is basically how it works. So this is the model that we normally know, right? You have a trademark, a brand, and they buy from a farmer or they buy from a factory that gets to a central warehouse, a regional warehouse, gets distributed to a store, and people would go to the store, or maybe even an online shop. The disadvantage of this is that the actual price that the factory is selling it for, 1 renminbi, is about 8 renminbi by the time it reaches the Chinese consumer. Because all of these different chains, they all have to have their own margin. There's a lot of cost added in logistics. So you need to get this down to get the people in the countryside interested. So what they did is they came up with a different model where a platform, and I'll show you one example in a bit, a platform is aggregating demand. Basically, they are saying we need like commodity products, and we can get a lot of volume and we can sort of sell that volume back, we can shift that volume back to the farmer or to the factory. And instead of using that old chain of retailers and wholesalers, that factory or farmer ships it straight to the consumer. So, which is incredibly cheap in China. So it only adds a bit of costs. So what the additional costs are a commission for the platform and the postage cost. And then it's only 2 renminbi compared to 8 renminbi. Now, one of the platforms, that's called C2M. C2M because of the movement from demand from consumers to the factories, instead of trying to push what you've already manufactured to the consumers, or F2C, factory to consumer, for the direct shipments. Now, the platform that has been really successful doing this is a company called Pinduoduo. And you'll hear that name again also after the break. And if you go into the Pinduoduo app, I'll break this down a bit so you can understand how this works. This is the screen that most of the e-commerce takes place on smartphones, of course. This is a screen that you'll see, and the regular price, basically what they say is these are sneakers. Most of the times these sneakers are produced by companies that also work for Nike, Adidas, Fila, all of those bigger brands. So they can make very good products, but they cannot sell that under those big brand names. But they can produce comparable goods for a regular price of 12 euro for a pair of sneakers. But then they say, you know what? If you buy it with somebody else, then it's only 9 euros. And if you still have a coupon, you normally, when you download an app, you get a coupon for your first purchase, then it's only 8 euro converted into euros. So they will show you the quantity of these shoes that have already been sold. That gives you more trust to actually go and buy it yourself. Initially, in the beginning, this company, Pinduoduo, what they did is they incentivized you to actually ask your friends and family and colleagues to join you in team buying. But that's not really necessary anymore nowadays, because there's so many people using this platform that you can simply start a new team purchase. Or if it's a popular product like this one, there is already somebody that says, I want to buy this product. Who wants to buy this with me? It doesn't have to be a person you know. It could be somebody living on the other side of China. So, and then you can simply join this person's team purchase, and then you will both get it for at least for 9 euros. Really cheap. Because these apps work with impulse buying, not so much the shelf commerce where you look for a specific product, every single purchase is immediately paid for and processed. There's no shopping basket. Sometimes compare it like, it's almost like you walk into an Action store here in the Netherlands and you see all of these things and that you really don't need, but they're so cheap that you just have to buy it, and you come home with 2 bags of junk that you probably never use. But that's how this app also works. They don't want you to think again about, maybe I don't need this. Immediately you basically pay for it and you buy it. So that's how C2M works.
So how does the team purchase beneficial to the Pinduoduo?
Well, basically what they do is they aggregate demand. So instead of one person buying, that always needs to be, in this case, two people, but sometimes it needs to be more.
Yeah.
So they sort of aggregate demand, and the advantage for the consumer is that you will get a lower price if you join up with a team. And thereby they increase the total demand that they can sort of give back to the manufacturer, also based on search engine advertising.
Yeah, but that is because there is somewhere in the logistics chain optimization or something like that.
Yeah, actually the way it works, this is almost just a fictitious price. Nobody really buys it for this. So but you get the feeling as a consumer, because you could buy it. If you hit this button, you can buy it for 88 without joining up with nobody whatsoever. But it is presented in a way that you get a lower price if you team up, and thereby they increase the number of people that will want to buy it.
Basically just an argument.
Yeah. True, yeah. So,
So delivery costs are extremely low.
It's really low.
How come?
Yeah. The labor costs in China are really low. There's also a lot of delivery companies that compete very fiercely, so they keep the price also very low. And it's also a matter of volume, because this company, Pinduoduo, 1/3 of all packages that are being sent in China comes from this platform. So the volumes that they can also get from the courier companies, the express companies, are enormous, and that's another reason why they can keep the price really low. Yeah. So, like I said, it's very much impulse buying. So, especially if you looked at the first versions of this app, you don't have that search bar here at the top. That search bar was actually here at the bottom, quite hidden, because they don't want you to search for products. They want you to browse and scroll through loads and loads of products. So, only in this kind of app in Pinduoduo, there's only 45% of people that actually find a product through search, and the rest through browsing and being inspired, so to speak. And this is based on a different type of getting people to buy, which is called interest-based commerce or content e-commerce. And the idea behind it, it's products that find people. People don't enter this app to find a product. No, they get presented with the right product. So it's algorithm recommendation engine based. So instead of having a very good search engine, which you'll still need for that part in the bottom, you need a very strong recommendation engine that serves the right products to these consumers. Now, to do that, you need a lot of data. So one of the things they do is they get a lot of consumers in by giving all kinds of incentives. Sometimes even like the first purchase for free. And then once you start using the app, there is something that I personally think is almost devious, and that is gamification. You very quickly get sucked into all kinds of games that have you spend a lot of time on the app. You can shake your phone, and then you can win microcredits, or you can pick a type of fruit, for instance, mangoes, and then you can grow a mango tree, and by the time it's fully grown, you get those mangoes shipped to you for free. That's cool, right? Or you can play a Candy Crush kind of game. And a lot of people spend hours and hours and hours playing these games. But why is it so devious? Because in the beginning, you get very fast, quite close to your goal. You always need to reach, for instance, a certain amount of fully grown tree, or a certain amount of cash that you generated before you can have a payout. So that might be 100 RMB, and you start with 90. So you're already there, 90% of your goal. But it gets progressively harder as you get closer to your goal. And then they say, well, you can speed this up if you invite your friends to download this app. And if you invite your friends to play this game with you together. Or you get extra water drops to grow your tree faster if you come back every 6 hours. So 4 times a day. Yeah.
I used to work for a gaming company, and it's amazing. So a lot of people use this and spend money, but it's amazing. The target for these gaming companies, this is not a gaming company, but in general is the whales. And often people with a lot of income would spend sometimes 5,000 to 10,000 euros a day on microtransactions.
Yeah.
It is so addictive. you stop thinking about money, you
Yeah.
stop thinking about anything. This is just so much fun. It's a game, it's a game, it's a game.
Yeah, yeah.
And it constantly keeps taking cents over cents.
Correct. And actually, this Pinduoduo company is a merger between an e-commerce company and a gaming company, and they together created this. So you have to come back several times a day. Then also, what they do is sometimes they say you can get fertilizer for your tree and grow it faster, but you'll have to watch products. You have to scroll through a feed of products for 2 minutes. And if you start doing that and you stop scrolling, then the timer at the top will stop as well. So you really have to go through that and of course, you will probably, because of the algorithm, the recommendation engine behind it, see products that you find interesting, and you will start buying things or clicking on things and thereby feed the algorithm again. A lot of these games, you also have to pick a type of product, and by the type of product that you pick, you also feed data again into the recommendation engine. So then, when you start one of those games and you start growing a tree, before you know it, you're raising pigs, you're raising cows, you're farming all kinds of grain. So you get sucked into different games and spend even more time on this. And it is, at the end of the day, really hard to actually get to those rewards without doing all of this. And if you look at this, what you're actually doing is you are doing the marketing for Pinduoduo. And what they have to pay you to do that is really, really low. So their customer acquisition cost, if you compare that to Alibaba and JD, especially in the beginning, was extremely low. It only cost them $2 to get a new customer. Why? Because the so-called K factor, the number of new users that acquire another new user for you, in the beginning was never less than 1. So the user base was growing itself. So also, because of all of those games, people were opening the app so often that if you compared if you took the monthly active users of the app and you divided the daily active users by the monthly active users, you could see that the stickiness of the app was really high. A very high, the app in China with the highest number of people that opened the app every single day. So,
can I have a question as well? Does it basically mean is that this is more geared towards people that have more time than money? That basically and therefore they spend the time in the app, train their algorithm, and therefore even the small money that they do have, they still buy something.
Correct. It's a low prices and a lot of time that they have available, because this doesn't work as well in the larger cities.
Okay.
In the larger cities, a concept like Gema, which is about convenience and not having to spend a lot of time going to the store, works much better. That's correct. Yeah. So this company is really successful. They have about the same number of users as Alibaba. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that people spend a lot less on Pinduoduo because it's such small purchases, such small amounts, than on Alibaba. They spend like 3, 4, 5 times more on Alibaba. So take that into consideration if you just look at the user number.
What is this in euros? The 2,800?
You have to divide it by 7 to get to euros. Yeah. So that's the annual amount that the average user will spend. So
I do think it's important to also say about the context in terms of size. Do you mention later anything about Singles Day? Because the latest Singles Day, for example, for JD was very interesting, just to talk about scope.
Yeah, I'm not including Singles Day in here because Singles Day is actually already a bit of old-fashioned shelf commerce. And as a matter of fact, both JD and Alibaba didn't even release their GMV figures because probably it was flat or even going down the last year. And what they've been doing, and that's why I think that it's a bit of a controversial topic, Singles Day used to be 1 day, now it's 3 weeks.
It's 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think JD for 2021, I think it was 139 billion.
Yeah,
over
could,
3 weeks.
yeah, could be. I've got some in this section on live commerce. I've got some figures for live streamers that are using Singles Day. So. I have that, but not in these slides. I think that the average salary in cities is about 5,000 renminbi, and it's probably about half in rural areas. But still, there's some people that, if you go to real rural areas, that can just basically just survive. There's no more poverty that people don't have enough to eat, but the poorest people can just only basically survive by basically growing their own crops. So that's a big difference. Yeah. So we've seen new retail and we've seen C2M as a reaction to what was happening in the market. With these new types of companies that were much more based on content, like for instance these games, Alibaba started to realize, well, we've got a bit of a problem because people don't come to our websites to be entertained. So e-commerce by itself doesn't generate traffic unless you have, like for instance, gamification. Then acquiring traffic is getting really expensive. Also, how do we get people to visit and to come to our website and to stay there for a long time if we're being based on shelf e-commerce? And then they realized we need content. So Alibaba was actually one of the first companies that started live commerce, live streaming e-commerce. And it's enormous in China. About 25% of all the e-commerce sales are being generated through live commerce. Now for the people that don't know live commerce, you've probably already seen a bit also happening on Amazon and on Facebook. I'll show you two examples. Here on the left, you'll see Vaya. She was the biggest live streamer before she got caught in a tax evasion scandal. And the guy on the left is Li Jiaqi. And they were, and he still is, probably the biggest earning live streamers. Now, what happened is basically Alibaba was an incubator for these types of live stream hosts. And they made sure that they would get a lot of traffic. So the platform really supported them and built them. Also, one thing that is really different compared to some influencers that you see in the West is they have very good entertaining skills to keep people glued to the screen. Both of them were previously salespersons. So they had their own shops. Vaya used to have a clothing shop. Li Jiaqi worked in a beauty care shop. So they know how to sell. But the most important thing is that they also have a team of hundreds of people behind them that make the product selections for them. And they also negotiate with all of the brands because they have so many followers that they can get the best bargains from the brand. And this is what normally also is missing in the West. Because of the best selection of products at the best price that you will not find anywhere else in the market, consumers have a lot of trust. And that's why a lot of Chinese people watch these live streams, and so much is being sold through these live streams. So these two guys, you can see the number of followers, you can see the GMV that they were generating. And in 2020, they did $8 billion just by the two of them, of course, with their team. And coming back to Singles Day, in 2011, in the pre-sale of Singles Day, they sold more than 3 billion in their live streams. So this is how enormous this is.
But that then feeds the how do you say, the team of a couple of hundred you mentioned behind that basically. Right?
Yeah.
It's not maybe that's a bit of a different view that people have, not a single person in a room making something. No. It is a massive thing behind it as well.
Yeah. It's the whole production team, the selection team, because Vaya and Li Jiaqi didn't do those negotiations themselves, but it's because of them that they could get their team could get the best prices.
Because that's currently where we're at the state, is that it is some random one person on Instagram sort of trying to do this, but that's very different setup.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Every now and then you have a company sort of leading.
Yeah. So, by the way,
So,
sorry. The platform they're doing that on, is that actually the shop itself, or?
I'll have that in the next slide for you. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
So Alibaba with Taobao was one of the first ones to actually Mogujie was the first one, but Alibaba was the one that really built this very big. But an interesting thing is that two other companies followed as well. That's Kuaishou and Douyin, and you probably recognize this logo as TikTok. So Douyin is a Chinese version of TikTok. Both apps are being are made by ByteDance. And what happened is, to answer your question also, there's basically two things that happened. You had these traditional e-commerce platforms, and they started to do video. So within the Taobao app or the JD app or the Pinduoduo app, you would have like a different tab in the app to watch live streams. And also, if you would browse through the apps, you would be pushed basically by advertising towards these different live streams. On the other hand, you had short video apps. They already did video, and they started to sell products. So you had two different movements at the same time. And this is why, if you remember that slide, that pie chart that I showed you in the beginning, this is why now these two companies have a large chunk of the market. And they basically took that away from Alibaba as well. Douyin, as a matter of fact, the latest figures that I've seen for last year has 10% market share now in e-commerce by just doing live commerce, mostly. Yeah. Another thing why this is working really well in China and not so well here. Here on the left is, I need to check if I have the sound turned off. Let's just see. Otherwise, you get a lot of Chinese. That might be fun as well. Let's see. No, okay, the quiet version. So this is actually a farmer that is live streaming how he's harvesting berries. And if you think, oh, this looks quite interesting, I want to buy that, you click on the product and you come to the product page, picture in picture, you will continue seeing the live stream. You can immediately say, you know what, I want to buy this product. You put it in your basket and you can go to checkout. And if you go to checkout, you will also be able to pay with Alipay or with WeChat Pay, so the two mobile payment options. And you haven't left the app at all. You can click buy, and if you bought before, your address is already in the app. So regardless who the seller is, you can simply, within the app, buy it, and then you just swipe to the next one. So this is how quickly it goes. Now TikTok did a test with Walmart, where they also did their first live stream. I think it was back in 2020. Or 21. And if you watch their live stream, they actually have the product assortment in there. If you find an interesting product, then you actually sort of leave the app and you go to probably the mobile website of Walmart. So if you now want to buy this and you say add to cart and you say check out, let's check out. What actually happens is, you need to log in to your Walmart account. And if you don't have a Walmart account, you first need to create a Walmart account. So it's not as seamlessly integrated in the same app. You basically have to go to a different app. And this is also one of the reasons why live commerce so far hasn't really taken off as well as in China.
But it's also partly about consolidation. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
For example, Tencent, JD, that they all own a lot of different things. Effectively, once you create an account, you've created an account over a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So that way, it's very easy to have a seamless. But here, market is a lot more fragmented. If somebody has a TikTok account, could be further away from Walmart.
Correct.
So it's very difficult to integrate.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to show in a bit as well. So we all know that TikTok can create very good recommendations in videos. So anybody here that is using TikTok a lot knows that once you use the app for a couple of days, it's getting very addictive because of the recommendation engine. So also, at the same time, if TikTok knows what your interest is in what videos you're watching, they can find related products for you and then start serving that as part of your feed. This is actually something that is already happening in TikTok in the West as well. But is really big in Douyin. So this is also why they call it interest-based or content-based e-commerce. It's based on your interest that they sort of distill from watching different types of videos. In China, it is even grown much further into a situation where you can watch a video and then click on a button and then actually order food in Douyin and have it home delivered. Or you can download a coupon that you can take to an offline store and get a discount there. So live services, as they call it, have started to integrate in Douyin already. So now you can go into your local city menu, also location-based, and they will tell you, if you click here, okay, you want to book a hotel, you can simply book a hotel inside Douyin. Live services already integrated. And this is something that they're also testing with in the UK already. Now, it's not just restaurants, it's not just hotels. You can beauty parlors, massage parlors, you can go to a karaoke bar, whatever. You can all find it and book it in Douyin. And why do you see these adverts? Based on the interests that you have watched in the app. So again, this is what it used to be. This is what it is now. These are the new types of e-commerce that have taken a large chunk of the market. Now, as you said, it's about consolidation. It's about ecosystems. And this is basically how it works. Let's go back to that Germa store. You come into a Germa store, you see that lobster, you think that's great. I'll have it prepared here. Oh, this is actually quite a cool store. They have a lot of interesting products also imported from the West. You go and shop a couple of times there, and then you think, you know what? I save a lot of time if I do that in the app. And once you have that app installed, if you don't have any other Alibaba apps yet, you get sucked into the whole ecosystem. So you might come in through Germa here or there, physical retail or online retail, and then you get sucked into social apps like Youku for video, Weibo for microblogging. You have a payment system. You have Ele.me for meal delivery. You have Didi for like the Chinese Uber. So there's all of these different systems that are also interconnected, and you can jump from one platform to another very easily, and it's all based on a generic user ID. So it might well be that I know that they are profitable now, but for 7 years, Germa was not profitable. But it didn't matter because it was an entry point to acquire these customers and suck them into the rest of your ecosystem. And Tencent, the company behind WeChat, and Jingdong, JD, are basically doing the same thing in their partnership, and they have a same type of ecosystem. Now you might think, okay, that's all interesting, but you don't live in China, so is this really important to you? You're not going to use these apps? Okay, it's inspiring, but so what? Why do I have to know about this? Well, that's the cliffhanger, because I don't think that this will stay in China. As a matter of fact, what I'll explain you after the break, this is coming our way, and it will leave China, and it's already here, and it's coming even more our way. And I'll tell you about it after the break. Okay? Yeah. Okay, I'll leave you guys with a bit of a cliffhanger before the break. So what's happening now? The Chinese are coming our way. As a matter of fact, they're already here. So what I'm going to do in the second part is I'm going to show you what happened with Amazon in the last 10 years, what's happening in China, which is creating a completely different situation than maybe 10 years ago. And then I'll go through some of the major players in cross-border e-commerce and also show you the challenges they have and some of the failures. This is something that I think in the West, a lot of companies are not yet fully aware of and are underestimating, especially what's happening in this region. So consider this especially to be sort of competitive intelligence for new players that are coming into the market. But let's go back a bit to a platform that we know much better, and that's Amazon. 3 years ago, everything stopped because of COVID, and as a public speaker, I had to go online. And of course, you want to look good if you're online. I'm not sure if that will help with me, but I did decide to buy a ring light. And I was already sort of ring light for online sessions that I was doing at that time. I also was a bit curious about the strange description in the header. And I thought, oh, this is a German company, JPAR.de. But if you then look at the actual company that is selling that, it's a Chinese company in Shenzhen. So it was actually a Chinese company selling this. Now, if you look at what happened at Amazon in the past 20 years, of course, at a certain time, they started building their marketplace functionality. Not just an e-tailer, what they mainly were in the beginning, but they started to build their marketplace functionality. And in 2013, they went really active into the Chinese market to find Chinese merchants to sell on Amazon. A few years later, in 2015, they actually made a completely Chinese backend for their website to make it easier for Chinese merchants. And by 2017, 1/3 of all international sales already originated in China. In some markets, it's even more. So you can see here, it's about 1/3 in US, UK, Germany, but Spain and France, more than half of all sales were coming from Chinese. The top sellers were Chinese. So why was this happening? Because Amazon wants a lot of sellers because that brings down the price. It's basically their flywheel, or as they call it, their virtuous cycle. So more sellers means also lower prices, means a better customer experience, more traffic, etc., etc. So the more sellers you have, and I think that the last estimations that I saw were that there's about 1 million Chinese merchants selling on Amazon. Now, some of these Chinese merchants among those 1 million are a bit naughty. And what did they do? They used so-called black hat tactics, because they were finding it harder and harder to actually sell on Amazon and make money. So they started to make fake reviews for their own products. They started to make fake reviews for their competitors, like very negative reviews or even safety reports. They were incentivizing their customers, like, if you leave a good review, I'll send you an extra gift. They were doing brushing. I think are you familiar with brushing? So it's like creating a fake order and paying somebody to place that order, but you basically send them an empty box. And then the whole system is basically thinking that you actually sold something, but you didn't really sell something, but it counts in the number of products that you sold in the statistics of your profile. They were cheating the algorithm in that way. They were manipulating product rankings. One of the things they did is, if they had an existing product on a page, they took out the old product, put in a new product, but left all of the existing reviews there. So if you would scroll down, you would find reviews that were not related to that product at all, but it still counted in the number of stars that you were seeing. And one of the worst things is that some of the Amazon China employees were even being bribed by merchants to give them a lot of data, or to activate their deactivated account again. So this was problematic, and Amazon also got a lot of criticism a couple of years ago. So they decided in 2021 to ban 3,000 Chinese, the 3,000 naughtiest Chinese merchants from their website. Of the 1 million. So it's just a small part, but the impact has been quite big, as you will see. So the Amazon market share of Chinese sellers went down to 33%, but it sort of has climbed back again if you look at the Chinese share of reviews. So it has sort of returned again. But the impact, as I'll show you, is quite large. Also, what's been happening in that 20 years is that more and more of those Chinese merchants have become factories. So they used to be trading companies. Back in 2004, 90% of the Chinese merchants were trading companies. Now 90%, that should be 80% because that doesn't match up.
The middleman was cut out?
Yeah. So basically what I showed you with that C2M is actually also happening. The factories are now selling directly on Amazon. So now the thing is, we need to explain why this is happening. Why are so many Chinese people interested in selling on these Western websites before we look at the Chinese alternatives? One of the things is that the internet growth has been stagnating in China. There's less new people coming into the market. Even though it's less than 75% at the moment, the remaining 25% are elderly people, are people in the countryside, and especially also people that cannot handle a smartphone. And they definitely don't have a laptop, so they are really difficult to get online. And that's why it's basically stagnating, the growth of new people coming into the market. And those people that are already in the market, most of them are already buying on e-commerce websites. So again, this leads to a very high competition between those parties that I've shown you, and the rising customer acquisition cost. So it's getting really expensive to find new Chinese shoppers. Now, another thing that has been happening, it's not just the Chinese companies or the Chinese websites where the competition is very fierce, but it's also among the merchants. Because if you sell a product on Taobao, you're not the only one. And you have a lot of other companies selling comparable products. And you even have to compete with brands that have lots of budget to create visibility. And what they sometimes say is that the small merchants is what people go to Taobao for, but then they will see the search engine advertising campaigns of bigger brands and they will go and buy something else. So it's getting really hard to still sell on Taobao. So that's why if these same companies were selling on Amazon, they could even charge 20 to 30%, 30 times the same price. They could charge a much higher price. And those 3,000 that were banned on
Amazon, they basically just moved to the next platform, to Walmart. So they're still there, but they're just on a buffer.
So this is what happened on Western sites. Also, what happened is that some of these merchants found that it would be much easier to actually go on Pinduoduo, the app that I talked about before the break. So they moved from Taobao to the competitors. One of the reasons also why Pinduoduo has been growing so fast. And a third route is that some of these merchants have been selling on Shein, on Temu, and on TikTok and some other platforms. So cross-border platforms from China, because it's getting really hard inside China. And that's why the same company that is selling this bikini on Amazon for 57 euros, and you can see that it's been sold by a Chinese, probably a Chinese factory, exactly the same product you'll also find on Shein for less than 10 euro. It's exactly the same product. So these factories and these merchants are simply starting to use multiple channels. The only thing is in case of Shein, Shein determines what the price is and not the merchant. So they set it at this less than 10 euro. So that's 4 reasons why things have started to change in China. Then India has had a couple of border conflicts with China. And as a sort of a retaliation, they decided to actually ban a lot of Chinese apps. And among those apps were also a couple of e-commerce platforms of Indian people that were buying on Chinese apps. And that's a bit problematic because Alibaba has set itself the goal of having 2 million customers by 2036. Now, yesterday I talked to the CEO of Alibaba North Europe, and he said we have 1 billion in China now, we have about 300 million in the rest of the world. But without India, it's going to be pretty hard to get to that 2 billion by 2036. So they have also put more emphasis on cross-border. Another thing that's been happening, the labor cost in China, so this is the index of labor costs, the labor costs are now 5 times what they were 20 years ago in China. The costs are really rising. And as a result of that, some companies, some Western companies that have their products produced in China are moving to Bangladesh, to Vietnam, to Cambodia, etc., etc. But it's not just those labor costs that are rising. It's also that the Chinese government is starting to be more critical about counterfeit products, fake products. Because now that selling abroad is so important, they don't want people to still think, oh, everything that comes from China is fake. So the government has started cracking down on some counterfeiting factories that in the beginning were very important for building the economy. Then you have the trade war that has been going on with the US. Then you had the coronavirus that we've had the last couple of years. And all of these different factors have resulted in overcapacity within these companies. And this overcapacity is also one of the things that Pinduoduo makes use of to help these companies fill up their overcapacity by asking for very low prices. At the same time, the Chinese government has been really tough with all of the internet companies. We were just talking about Ant Group, but also Alibaba and Meituan. They have been getting very high fines for antitrust and anti-monopoly practices that they had in the market. But at the same time, the government realizes that these companies are very important for the Chinese economy. So the National Development and Reform Commission is a very important planning organ within the Chinese government, has actually said to these Chinese internet companies, it's part of your duty to help the small and medium-sized companies in China go abroad. So you should be facilitating that, because we need to fill that overcapacity in our industry, in our manufacturing base. So that's why this guy, Hong Yong, he's also an advisor to the government. He looked at Amazon, especially after the ban of those 3,000 merchants, and he said, well, the costs are rising, it's getting more difficult, more costly to advertise, so these merchants need to invest in search engine advertising for visibility, they need to be paying more commission, logistics. If you want to sell on Amazon Prime, your product needs to be fulfilled by Amazon in an Amazon warehouse, for instance, in the US. Then you also, if you have fulfillment by Amazon, you don't get the customer data because they ship it to the customer and they don't tell you who that customer is. So they cannot do any precision marketing, they cannot do any customer research. And then you had the ban of all of those merchants. So this guy, Hong Yong, he basically said, maybe we should look for other ways and not use Amazon all the time, because Amazon is starting to be a chokehold on our exports. So he advised the government to actually support smaller companies to set up their own independent websites on top of the bigger internet platforms. And also, he said the government should have strict oversight on those platforms so that the things that happen on Amazon don't happen on these independent sites, because that will be disastrous for the reputation of these websites. And we need to build a talent pool to help us do all of this. And actually, the Chinese government has been making a lot of money available in subsidizing to help companies set up their own websites. So some of the examples that are already in the market are Anchor. Anybody heard of Anchor? They're quite active in the US. They sell power banks. And it's basically a company, it's a website that has been set up by the factory that is making these, and they are selling C2M directly to the Chinese consumer or to the Western consumer. Another example is Outer. They make outdoor furniture. So for in your garden, also set up by a Chinese factory, and it goes straight from the factory to the Western consumer without any Amazon in between. And that's why also, if you look at this picture, of course, what we've seen in the West, that whereas it was getting harder to sell in the Chinese market, it was actually getting easier in some of our markets under the COVID crisis, because a lot of people started going online, and especially here in 2020, especially also in markets like the US, there were a lot of growth potential, a lot of people coming into the market, and yeah, maybe we should look more at those types of market instead of our home market. So that's why after first going rural, going inland, China and Chinese merchants have been going out, and they're now in our markets. So this is the growth figures, and you can see that when most of these things that I've shown you, most of these problems have become quite problematic, it started rising again. This is probably a bit lower because of the zero COVID policies in China, but the actual cross-border e-commerce exports have risen quite starkly in the last couple of years. So let's look at some of the companies that are doing this. Like I said, I was with Alibaba yesterday, and of course you know Alibaba from AliExpress, which they use here in the West. But they actually Alibaba started as a B2C platform, selling from Chinese companies to purchasers here in the West, so for sourcing. They came much later, after they already had Chinese Taobao and Tmall websites. They came with AliExpress, launched in 2010. They don't give a lot of data, so this is the last figure that I've seen, 10 billion GMV in 2019, 80 million annual active customers, and some of their main markets are Russia, Spain, France, Poland, and Brazil in the last couple of years. But it's not really been doing very well, because so much of the attention of Alibaba was focusing on their home market with all of those new players and all of those new forms of e-commerce, that AliExpress was basically something they did on the side. And it's not really at any time been a real threat to our e-commerce companies. And maybe that's why there was a reorganization last year in Alibaba, and basically they integrated AliExpress under Lazada. And Lazada is Alibaba's Southeast Asian e-commerce company. They bought that from Rocket Internet a couple of years ago. And if you compare Lazada and AliExpress, AliExpress is active in 200 countries, Lazada only in 6, but their GMV is roughly the same. So Lazada is doing something very well. And that's why the Lazada management has seemingly been given more say over what is happening in Europe, for instance. So it's been moved into their division. And the first thing that we actually see happening is a new website called Miravia that has just been launched, I think in December in Spain. Why did they launch this website? Because AliExpress has been trying to convince local brands, but also international brands, to sell on AliExpress. If you were a local or especially a big international brand, would you want your product to be shown on AliExpress? No, why not?
Reputation for low quality.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, cheap stuff. You don't want your brand to be on that same platform as a lot of low quality stuff. So they set up a new website, and they've now actually been able to get some of the bigger brands to join that new website. So they are differentiating their strategy. And what they also are doing is they even have in that new platform a supermarket. So they have an online supermarket, and even brands like Mars and Ariel are now already participating with Alibaba under this new platform. But it's being managed basically by Lazada, by a Spanish team in Madrid, I think. So this is one of the things that is happening now. Alibaba also has invested in Trendyol, an e-commerce platform in Turkey that is also expanding to different countries in Europe. But what they are doing now is they are actually saying, okay, if we have that platform and Turkey has a large manufacturing base, maybe we can start manufacturing some goods or working with the manufacturers in Turkey, which is much closer to the European and the Middle Eastern market. So we can shorten delivery times, which have always been a problem with cross-border e-commerce. Now, on top of that, you have Cainiao. I don't know if you've heard of this company. It's basically a joint venture where Alibaba has about 60-70% share. And they're the logistical part of the ecosystem. This is the location they've just built in Liège, in Luik. And they are expanding much more around the world. So they have a warehouse now, a regional hub in Belgium. They are planning distribution centers and smart lockers in Brazil. Brazil is a market that you'll see a couple of times again in the second part. Mexico, they have sorting centers. They have parcel lockers in France and Spain. And they've just this week signed an agreement with DHL to do the same thing in Poland. And they are planning sorting centers in Spain, France, Italy, and Germany. So all kinds of different logistical expansions. Now, again, I'll leave this in the handouts for you, if some more details. They also had a Shein clone, Ali Likes, which has not been very successful. And I'll include a link to an article specifically about that. So Alibaba, to wrap up, is not really doing all that well, but they are working really hard with new types of websites and their logistics, upgrading their logistics to become more successful. So it's an important one to look at. Then we have Shein. Who knows Shein? Yeah. Who has actually bought on Shein? Yeah. Guilty. So.
Before the scandal, I would say.
Which scandal was that? Yeah, it's a really, really interesting company. So for the few that really don't know too much about it, they actually started in 2017 as Shein site. And it is a company that is based in China, but they only sell outside China. They don't even bother with the Chinese market anymore. And one of the reasons why they were really successful is when they were still Shein site, they could use all of these online influencers, send them some free goods, and they would make these Shein haul videos. Something that the influencers nowadays are asking a lot of money for. They were still in 2011 doing for free because it gets me free product. So they're able to build their brand awareness very, very cheaply at the start. And some of the new companies coming into the market don't have this advantage anymore. Shein is a so-called specialty retailer of private label apparel, which basically means is they make their own products. They're not a marketplace. So they're different in that way from some of the other parties in China. How do they do that? Like I said, it's basically all happening, most of it is happening in Nansun. It's a region in Guangzhou. And that's where a lot of the factories that they work with are located. And they have a central warehouse from where they ship out internationally by planes in Foshan. And this is the way they do it. And this is really a business model that uses that C2M, but then tweaks it again to make it something really, really unique. They work with their own designers and with ODMs, which are factories that basically propose designs to Shein. Then they also do a lot of research on the internet. You sometimes see articles that say they have some kind of AI algorithm that combs the internet for new trends. That's bullshit. That's not the case. It's mostly people manually just searching what are the latest trends. So the smart stuff is really in the supply side. So a supplier then proposes a design. They actually, in the Shein ERP system, they have to enter all of the details about the material. And what they can also do is they can use a raw material library of Shein, because Shein has negotiated with their suppliers for really low prices and really large volumes. So that's one of the reasons why they can keep the price down. Then Shein evaluates their proposal and checks the prices if they are okay. Then some samples are created within 3 days. Shein normally might be asking for a couple of changes, so 2 or 3 change rounds. And then the same supplier, that factory, gets the first order. But that first order is most of the time only 100 or 200 pieces of that specific product. If Shein thinks that it might be really popular, it might be 500, but really, really small quantities. It has to be delivered within 3 to 4 days. And then within 3 to 4 days, it is in the warehouse and it goes on the website. And then the website basically is one enormous A/B test. So they will check what products are really popular. And on average, they do 2,000 new products a day, 2,000 new designs a day that go on the website. So it's a continuous process. The goods get delivered to the central warehouse in Foshan, and from there they are shipped to transit warehouses all over the world and handed over to local parcel companies. Then, if it turns out that a specific product is really popular, only then does that factory get their second order. And if it stays popular, on a daily basis, they get new orders. Still small orders, but this is when that factory is starting to make money, finally. And in the meantime, within 14 days after shipment, it arrives somewhere in the world with a customer. And that's 28 days before it was actually designed. So most of the things that consumers will buy, if it gets on the website and they will receive it, it didn't exist yet the month before. So this is how fast it goes. And there, the prices are extremely low, just like I showed you before with the comparison with Amazon. And one of the reasons is because they can keep the raw material costs really low. But the main smart thing is also because of those low order quantities, they have very few waste. Their competitors like Zara and Uniqlo and H&M, they have seasonal collections, and they end up having a lot of waste for some of their products. Shein doesn't have that, and that's another reason why they can keep the prices low. And by having those low prices, they can still compete with those factories that are now in Bangladesh and Vietnam, etc., etc. Sorry?
Very green.
I don't know if it's very green. That's what they say. Yeah. So that's one of the things. Well, the thing is that once you say to Shein, well, this sustainability and the environment, they say, well, this is very green.
Let's say environmental conscious.
Yeah.
And if you that graph you just showed with the, what was it, 28 days? What is our current version of fast fashion? What, you know, the Zara number? I think it's like 6 weeks or so, right? Or not?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So I think that every season they have like 3 or 4 rounds that they have, but this is continuously.
Yeah, so this is the faster fashion, basically.
Yeah, there's ultra fast fashion.
Yeah.
Do they make profit?
Yeah, they do. They've been making profit for several years already. Yeah. So, and remember, they've been active since 2011 already. So it's not, they've become really big and they're everywhere now, but they've been doing this for quite a while already. So they became the most downloaded app in the US in May 2021. In April, you might have heard this, in April, they, after a funding round, they were valued at 100 billion US dollars. This has gone down by 1/3. And according to analysts, it's not because of a problem within the company, it's because they really were overvalued in April, but it still makes them one of the most valuable unicorns in the world, or startups in the world. So, on the consumer side, if there was recently Moneyco.uk did a research and they looked at Google data. And Shein in 113 countries is now the most Googled fashion brand. And if you look at what that was last year, they weren't even in the whole leaderboard. It goes much further down, but they weren't even in the list last year. And they are now number 1 above Zara, Zalando, Nike, etc., etc. So as far as consumers are concerned, really popular. They've been able to get their repurchase rate up from 30% to 55%. According to Shein, they have an average customer is placing 10 orders per year and is ordering about 75 per order. So, and most of this really happened in the last couple of years. They've also seen their average spend per customer in the US. Most of the data that I have is for the US. Has been rising, and one of the reasons is because they've been adding more different product categories. They started out with fashion, but they now also have pet products, they have home decoration, they even have some beauty care products. So they are growing their total assortment.
Do you see part of their success also that they do good quality rating?
Quality rating in what way?
Obviously, they produce their own product or they design whatever their product. So you actually are quite sure that the product is of a good quality.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things, I don't have it in this presentation, but it is in the article that I'll put in the email if you scan the QR code at the end, is one of the things they work very closely with those manufacturers and they do a lot of quality control. And if they find out, for instance, a recurring problem within a product, for instance, that it has spots in the fabric, then they actually send a project team to go to that factory to find what the problem is and fix it with the manufacturer. So they do that quite a lot. Still, I think that a lot of the products are quite shoddy, but they do have quite a lot of quality control. Yeah.
Do you know anything about the return rate? It's a huge cost.
Yeah. Most of also the other companies that I'll show you, if there is a product complaint, most of the time it doesn't get returned.
Yeah,
because the cost.
Prices are so low.
Yeah.
I mean, if I ever buy anything from AliExpress, I don't even bother sending it back if I don't like it.
Yeah. If it is a marketplace, then most of the time the merchant will just give a refund because that's cheaper than having it returned, because the postage from us to China is much more than the other way around. Or they will give you a discount or a coupon for a next purchase. So that's normally what happens in these kinds of platforms. Yeah. But this is what's been happening with their revenue. So they're doing really well, and they are now bigger than H&M and Zara combined. In the US, they have a market share of 40% now. And this is really something that happened over the last 3 years, probably. So this is Rui. Rui is one of my colleagues at TechBus. And she recently tweeted that it is hearsay, but it's very interesting that a friend of hers was golfing with a logistics executive from Hainan in China. And that guy said that 1/3 of the cargo that is leaving, the air cargo that's leaving China to the US now are Shein orders. 1/3. So, and she said, well, it's wild, but it's very well possible. This is how strong it's been growing. The different markets that they're in. Very interesting one is that the market share that they have, or the share of revenue per region in the Southeast Asian region actually is going down. Why? Because they don't have a really strong position, because everything is already very cheap and a lot of Chinese companies are already active in that region. So it's much harder to compete with what is already there, for instance, on Lazada. Logistics, again, They are very interested in Brazil as a growth market, so they are opening up, as a matter of fact, a marketplace with Brazilian manufacturers selling on their platform. They have one warehouse in Indiana. They are planning 2 more in the next 2 years. Poland, they have a leased warehouse, and also just like Alibaba, they've started manufacturing in Turkey as well to be closer to the Middle East and to Europe. So
Turkey in general has a lot of fashion manufacturers, supply has a lot of factories in Turkey.
yeah, and the government in Turkey is also really pushing that as a growth sector. Yeah. Now, another interesting thing is that Shein has even opened a store on Amazon now. So you have a Shein store on Amazon. I wouldn't suggest you go and shop there though, because Shein on Amazon, the same product costs about €30, and on Shein itself, it's €11. So again, different distribution channels, but also different prices for exactly the same product. And you have a lot of clones like Cider, and Alibaba has Ali Likes. So the next one, the one that we all sort of know about, TikTok. TikTok, of course, Douyin in China has more than 700 daily active users, and it has more than a billion monthly active users in TikTok in the rest of the world. Now they want to monetize that through other ways than just advertising. Especially in the last couple of years, they've also seen that the advertising market, if the economy is sort of struggling, you'll immediately see that in your advertising income. So in China, they've already for several years been pushing traffic to external websites, and they are now doing basically the same thing in the US. So they're pushing from TikTok traffic to Shopify and Walmart. But there's more. Because they thought, okay, this live commerce, what I showed you before the break, this is really popular. Maybe we should do that in other countries as well. So they've started live commerce in the UK. It wasn't extremely successful. 500 viewers at the peak of the first live stream they did on TikTok. So not really something to write home about. And also what they realized is they were inviting a lot of Chinese merchants and Chinese companies to live stream on TikTok Shops UK. But even though they gave incentives, so 90 days, no commission on your sales, and also free shipping, we'll arrange that for you, there was an enormous language barrier, of course, with the viewers in the UK. And also cultural misunderstandings. So that turned out to be really difficult. But at the same time, these merchants couldn't hire UK staff to do that because that was far too expensive with UK costs, UK salaries. And you had a very long delivery time. So this was already a problem. Then TikTok UK decided, what if we incentivize influencers in the UK to live stream? So they gave them all kinds of incentives. Like if you're the top seller of the month and you don't have to pay commission, etc., etc. They even said you can win up to £3,000, but you have to in vouchers, which you probably can spend on the platform again. But you'll have to do 32-hour live streams per month, which is really completely normal in China. But you can see what's happening here. They're rolling out the model without any localization to the UK. They did get some new people in, so more merchants were actually from the UK compared to when they started in August 21. And they actually also started training these people. They set up a website, a TikTok Academy, and they had webinars, and they had all kinds of resources to train these people how to do their live streaming. And this is the result so far. So this is the average GMV in China on Douyin, the Chinese TikTok, per month. They are also doing live streaming on TikTok in Indonesia. And this is the UK. It doesn't even show up in this graph. So this is what the UK was doing per month. And this is actually what, 10% of the physical goods online in China are sold through Douyin live streams. And the total in the UK is only the size of one Douyin shop, one Douyin live streamer per month. So somehow it's not really taken off. But still, TikTok has enormous ambition, and they say that they want to have 3 trillion renminbi, like $440 billion in 5 years. That's the same as what 75% of what Amazon has now. I have my doubts, but who knows? One of the problems is, just like we discussed earlier with AliExpress, is that if TikTok goes to these brands and the trademarks and say, you can live stream, you can create live streams on our platform, these brands say, well, hold on, it's actually really expensive to have live stream broadcasts. And I'm really not comfortable with the big discounts you're asking me, just like they do in China. And again, I don't want to harm my reputation by being on TikTok, which is also a bit of a controversial app, of course. So they were not interested. At the same time, these live streamers also said, when TikTok came to them, you can create live streams for brands. These live streamers said, what, 32-hour live streams in a month? Are you out of your mind? I'd rather make one very well-paid video for a brand and put it on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And it's also much easier on other platforms to build followers, because TikTok is based on content algorithm, and not based on creating a lot of followers. So they were also not really interested. Then on the consumer side, there were also problems because, like we heard before, some of the merchants were refusing to do refunds, and they were handing out coupons. Unreliable logistics, long delivery times. Customer support was really terrible for people that had problems. And at the end of the day, live commerce has not been a success in the UK. And TikTok is sort of starting to refocus on other areas as far as live commerce is concerned. Yeah.
How do you think the political situation in the US might impact TikTok in the coming period? Because they keep trying to ban it.
Yeah. The thing is, have you seen the details on Project Texas? Yeah. Project Texas, I would say that theoretically should solve all of the problems, because TikTok will be like a completely closed off fort run by Oracle and with a lot of oversight. There's no other app that will have so much oversight as TikTok will have in Project Texas. But it's a political thing. And I don't know if even that will be enough to save TikTok in the US. Yeah.
Because all their software is built in China, and there have been some companies like Zoom. Zoom tries really hard to brand itself as a US company, but in reality it's a Chinese company, because even though it has headquarters in San Francisco, the product and software development is in China. And the amount of data being siphoned daily is mind-blowing, especially at the scale. So I'm not sure, more and more countries are actually calling for ban restrictions and this kind of thing.
And it could be a domino effect that if it falls in the US, then it might fall somewhere else. So that's one of the really big challenges that TikTok has. But
the fact that the TikTok makes like crazy amount of revenues, and the rate that they're going, that there's actually more of a lobby setup done by competitors who say it's Chinese.
Well, yeah.
Set up in order to kind of try to stifle their competition growth.
It's known that Facebook is paying a lot of bad PR for TikTok to create a lot of bad stories. So there's been, I think last year, a report about that. So it's a really dirty game that is going on there.
I want to be as 100% convinced like it's going to be banned because it's Chinese, but it's a political game in the sense of business politics.
It is,
just pure politics.
Yeah. But if you find the article, do check out what Project Texas is. That's basically totally local hosting in Texas by Oracle, completely walled off from any Chinese staff and data transfers.
Which
So
is kind of fair, because to operate in China, you have to host local.
it's the same thing. Yeah. So it's quite ironic, because when that came out, I said, oh, this is how they do it in China. And all of these companies have been complaining, like, I need to set up a JV in China and have my data there. So, and then they say we're being kept out of China, which is really not fully correct. But it's exactly what Project Texas also is. Yeah. interesting to watch. Still, so in the UK there's problems, but they still are working on a project called Project Aquaman, where they want to shorten delivery times to different places in the world by having UK warehouses and having those Chinese merchants ship popular items to that UK warehouse and then do fulfillment from there. And that would bring it down to 3 to 5 days. Another thing that went wrong in the UK is cultural clashes. So the British staff had real problems with the 996 from 9 in the morning to 9 in the evening, 6 days a week working culture. You've seen the KPI, right? 440 billion within 3 years, I think it was. Unrealistic KPIs, relationships built on fear. The poor language skills of the Chinese managers that were sent to the UK. Their management styles, which really don't match up with our way of working, not even in the UK. They were also not allowed, the local staff, to participate in the decision making. They just had to execute what the Chinese manager said. And there was a lot of confusion because the organization constantly kept changing, which is totally normal in a Chinese organization. And the work objectives kept being adjusted all the time as well. On the other side of the world, the Chinese staff at Douyin were also not very happy because they had to work harder for less pay than those lazy bosses in the UK, according to them. And they had to work very unconventional working hours to accommodate their British colleagues. So a lot of British staff left. There was a real exodus mid last year. And now the ratio of Chinese to British has gone up from 1 to 9 to 5 to 5. So 50% now. So more Chinese people actually, and I don't think that is solving the existing problem. It's probably only making it worse. So the model doesn't work. These are quotes from a TikTok UK former employee. He said the model doesn't work and the management won't listen when we tell them it does not work here, live commerce in its current form. They say those leaders, those managers have never been to the UK. They don't speak English. We have never been to China. We don't speak Mandarin, potato, tomato. It's not working in practice. Still, TikTok is pushing this through in more and more markets, TikTok shops, mostly live streaming. So these are their top 10 markets as far as users is concerned. They're in the US, in Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, and they are also planning a TikTok shop, to launch TikTok shop in Brazil again and in Spain. Brazil and Spain are two markets that the Chinese companies are really interested in. So Brazil and Spain. And then the last one, and I think maybe one of the most interesting ones. It's called Temu. Temu stands for Team Up. So it's launched in September last year. And to the Chinese users of YouTube, they actually had this advert which says, Pinduoduo lai Meiguo. Pinduoduo has come to America. That's how it was positioned. Now let's see if that's true. When I first opened it and when I wrote my first article about Temu, I really thought that it's really much more like a Shein clone. But quickly I realized that it's actually different. Again, they have really low prices. And if you wonder, again, about those price differences and how that can be offered at such low prices, again, remember that it's still the same factories. The same factory that is selling this air compressor for $40 on Walmart is selling it for less than 20 on Temu. Now you might think, well, this is really the bottom price. It cannot go any lower, but this same product in China on Pinduoduo is selling for less than $6. And they are still making a bit of margin on that. I just took some random products. So this one, also a jacket, one jacket, almost $60 on Walmart, $24 on Temu. You can also see that they have a problem with unconventional pricing. It's like really strange prices. And this is what it sells for in China. And so even though we think this is really cheap, compared to the manufacturing costs, it's still really quite high. And this is also, again, why these companies, these merchants, are much more interested in selling to us than selling in the Chinese market. And the speed with which this came to be is really amazing, because 1 year ago, January 2022, is when they had the first meeting within Pinduoduo about maybe we should do cross-border e-commerce. They sent some staff to the US and to Europe to do some research about consumer needs, consumer habits, and they were talking to some logistical potential partners. Then in 2022, they decided on the product categories and on how they would set up logistics. 80 people in their staff, core team. They launched their Facebook page in August 2022. September, the website launched. They were at 200 people in the Temu team. End of October, 1.5 million GMV already per day, 700 people working in the Temu team. November, they became the most downloaded app in the US. In January, they had 18 million downloads. They've stayed in the top 3, most of the time in the first place, ever since November in the US. 18 million downloads by January 2023, and they are now launching a Canadian website, all over the course of 1 year. This is China speed. And this is why this is a real threat to all of us, if you're a Western brand or a Western e-commerce platform. Now, enormous. On one hand, enormous, but on the other hand, very little. And I'll show you in a bit. A big difference with Shein is that they are also sort of doing a managed platform. They actually decide what goes on their website. The Pinduoduo manufacturers can request if they can also sell on Temu. And then Temu will ask for samples and decide if the quality is good enough to actually go on a cross-border platform. But an interesting thing is that there's much more product categories than you will see, for instance, on a Shein. So basically anything that you can think of is selling on this platform. So not just apparel. Now, I wrote an article about Temu in September, and I wrote an update in January, and then I was playing around in the app again. And then I found out that if I go to my personal menu, I found something here, earn credits and free gifts, like hidden away, still a bit hidden away in the app. If I click on that, bloody hell, there's all kinds of games that you can play. It's still hidden away, but maybe I should click on one of those things. Oh, I need to pick a product. I pick this product, data being collected about me. And then I need to start feeding fish. I need to start giving them fish food. And if I have 8 fish that I feed enough, then I will get this product for free. How do I do that? At a certain point, I don't have any fish food anymore. They give you a lot of free fish food, but then they say, if you want more food, invite new users. So that's why getting the first people on this app is really expensive, and they are paying a lot of advertising, especially on social media. But once they have that core number of users, those new users will start create more users, that K factor that I showed you with Pinduoduo. So browse a list of items for 30 seconds. Or come back 3 times during the day, log in, and it will give you free food. So before long, I was sending my wife an invitation because I needed fish food. And then 2 days later, there's a new game called Farmland, and I need to pick a product again, and I start growing crops. And when I started growing this type of crops, then before long, it tells me you can also grow tomatoes. And I get sucked into the same type of game. So in the back end, they are already building exactly the same system as they have in China, in Pinduoduo. And it's a matter of time before this will also be in the main menu on the main page. So their expansion plans also, they also want to go to Spain. They already have the app downloadable in Africa, although it doesn't work yet. You cannot order from it yet. So that's what's been happening. Now, if we look at all of these different developments, again, this is what we used to do. You would buy your products at Walmart, or you would buy them online at Amazon, and basically, except for that Chinese factory, it was a completely Western supply chain. and with Western retailers and Western wholesalers. Now, or after a couple of years, we got fulfillment by Amazon, where these factories and brands actually put it in the Amazon warehouses. You also saw the arrival of drop shipments straight to the consumers, and the platforms were Walmart and Amazon, with a lot of 1 million Chinese merchants on that platform. Then you got platforms like AliExpress and Wish. Wish is a US platform, but it basically buys all of their materials again from those same Chinese factories. And Alibaba is setting up its own logistics to be closer to those different companies. And then these factories start thinking, I don't really need that Western brand anymore. I can just sell the same stuff on Shein, and I can sell it on Temu. And I don't need any Western retailer or wholesaler. And then the whole chain is turning red, is starting to become Chinese. The consumers will get very low prices, but everything that was blue here before is facing a real big challenge. Now, again, this I'll put in the handouts. You have a summary of the characteristics of all of these platforms, but there's also some train wrecks. It doesn't always work, and it doesn't always go well. For instance, Tmall Hong Kong closed. Demon Studio, If You, Funnel, all initiatives by ByteDance have closed. AliLikes is not working out. And JD has recently also closed their, or in March is closing their Thailand and Indonesian business. And Joybuy was also a failed project. So it's not always working out. At the same time, a lot of governments, or for instance in the EU, are leveling the playing field by saying you need to pay VAT, even on these very small packages. That's what's been happening in the UK. This is a challenge for cross-border commerce. In China, they can use the Universal Postal Union agreement, and they have very low postage rates. But this is also changing because China is not really considered to be a developing country anymore that gets these specific rates. So postage costs will go up. Also, they will have to follow the European legislation for terms and conditions. Alibaba can no longer say, if you have a dispute, you need to go to a lawyer in Shenzhen or... No, you need to be able to do that here. And you also have your rights of return of a product. And then there's all kinds of safety, sustainability, quality counterfeits, and more consumer organizations are also being very critical about Chinese cross-border commerce. So the challenges for these kinds of companies are, how do I figure out those local needs and habits? The language, the communication style, the problems that we've seen at TikTok. The logistics, you need to be closer to the consumer. Work ethics, those British people don't want to work as hard as the Chinese staff at TikTok or at ByteDance in Beijing. Legislation, China is very easy. It's an enormous market with one type of legislation. But even in the EU, there's all kinds of different legislation between countries, let alone outside, across the whole world. And then you have those import taxes and the postage fees. And the biggest thing that is going wrong now with failed initiatives is lack of localization. It's the same problem that eBay had when eBay tried to conquer the Chinese market and lost to Alibaba's Taobao, because eBay didn't localize. And this is also where the main challenge is for these companies. Now, have you ever seen this store? Yeah? You know what it is?
Not the store, but the brand.
This is an initiative. I'll be very short about it because I can talk the whole evening about this. I don't want to do that to you. Ochama. It's a pickup store and home delivery. So it's by JD.com. It launched in January. It's already closed 3 out of 4 stores. Most of the Dutch management has already left. So you see the same problems occurring, like the COO, the CMO, and the buying and merchandising director, which they recruited from Ahold, probably with a lot of money. They all left after 1 year. I'm not sure if they left by their own decision, but they're all gone now. 3 out of 4 shops are closed. And those shops were basically pickup stores where you could pick up something that you had ordered online. And they are replacing that now by other pickup points by third parties. Now, they recruited these third parties on WeChat, on the Chinese chat app WeChat. So initially, those were all tea houses and Chinese restaurants and tokos and that kind of stuff. And now they also have 50 locations of blokker where you can pick up your stuff. And they think that this is going to solve their issue. They won't work with their own expensive shops anymore. But besides some other problems that you can read in an article that I can send to you, if I decide now to order and go and pick up my order in my hometown, Uden, I can only do that on Tuesday afternoon between 4 and 4:30, or between 2 and 4:30. It's not extremely flexible. I'm probably better off just ordering my stuff with a local supermarket. So to wrap up, I think that you really need to focus or keep your attention and continue watching China. On one hand, because of the inspiration of all new kinds of e-commerce, but on the other hand, because there's also threats coming our way with these new cross-border e-commerce models. I've written much more about that. If you're interested in going much deeper, and if you're interested in the PDF of the handouts, you can scan the QR code, fill in your details, and I'll have that in your mailbox tomorrow. So, thank you.
And I think other people might also have questions, but one thing that is really standing out for me is and maybe you didn't cover that deliberately, but what's the role of the Chinese government in this? Because that's like, I'm also quite aware of the whole data privacy and these nonsense things we have in the West, right? So what's your vision on that?
Well, data privacy, as a matter of fact, China in 2021, I think it was, 2021, they implemented the Personal Information Protection Law, which has for consumers with commercial companies, not with the government, that's an exclusion, but with commercial companies, the same level of protection as the GDPR.
Really? Okay.
They actually sent a team to study our GDPR, and they implemented the same thing, with the only exception is domestic security. So the police can still access a lot of data if they want to, if they need to, if they think they need to. But commercial companies have a GDPR-like law. The other thing, the role of the Chinese government is that they are basically supporting this movement of cross-border e-commerce to the West. On one hand, they are telling the Chinese internet companies, this is a task that we're giving you. And on the other hand, they're making a lot of budget available to create those talent pools, to have people create independent websites for them, to set up all kinds of incubator zones. So they are really pushing this.
So it's not that the database of ByteDance is also the database of the government. There is a split in that sense.
No, basically the thing is, and that's the whole discussion, if the government wants to, they can go to a commercial company and says, we want data on, for instance, this person.
Yeah, because that's the whole social credit system and everything. That is actually really there, right?
Oh, no, that's not. Huh? Oh, don't start me on the social credit system. No, the social,
I wonder if you can confirm for me if this is true or not. What I heard is that in China, every large company needs to have in its management or somewhere in the structure a representative from the ruling party.
Yeah.
So they always have insights and impact and help steer decisions.
Well, you need to realize that 1/5 of the employees is a party member anyway. It's about 1/5 of the population.
This is specifically an official representative of the party, which is helping them make their decisions.
And it is supposed to be a liaison manager with the government. But at the same time, they're also basically keeping an eye on things. Yes. Yeah, the social credit system, the way it really doesn't work the way we think it works.
Okay,
I've got a
whole
different keynote on that that I can do some other day.
Next topic.
But it's not as black and white. Mostly companies are running their own databases. But if there is a security issue, the government can go to these companies and say, we want the data of Jons.
But on an individual level, which is a very different thing than what you have in the West. Like it's always somewhat anonymized or grouped or whatever, but you can do it on
they specifically want to be able to see what you are doing, for instance, on WeChat or what you're buying on any website.
Yeah, luckily I'm not on WeChat, but
Okay, other questions?
Okay, well, thanks a lot. I think that was a bit of an information overload, but I'm to be honest, I'm very impressed. It actually blown me away, and it's also what I hope, that we sort of opened up a new world, and actually also in this field. So it's not really good for my imposter syndrome. I thought I knew something about this thing, but yeah, this was really interesting. So well, thanks a lot, and thank you, Ed, for educating us on this.
Yeah, glad to do so. Thanks for having me. Thank you.